سخنرانی دکتر طارق الهاشمی، نایب رئیس جمهور عراق. وضعیت در عراق، دیکتاتوری، بحرانها و مداخلات رژیم ایران. کنفرانس در بروکسل به ریاست استرون استیونسون، رئیس هیئت رابطه با عراق در پارلمان اروپا، 16 اکتبر 2013، 24 مهر 92. سخنرانی‌های نخست وزیر سید احمد غزالی، لورد مگینس، استاندار ایو بونه، پاولو کازاکا، طاهر بومدرا، پروفسور ریمون تنتر و سرهنگ وسلی مارتین.
La voix que nous venons d'entendre, Monsieur le Président, c'est la voix de l'Irak que nous aimons. C'est la voix d'un grand pays, d'un grand peuple, d'une grande nation, dont malheureusement les trésors ont été outrageusement pillés au cours de ces dernières années, ce qui est un désastre pour la culture et pour l'humanité. Et ces propos sont ceux d'un homme politique digne de ce nom, d'un homme de courage, qui est d'ailleurs assis à côté d'un autre homme de courage que je voudrais aussi saluer, si vous permettez, c'est le président Stuart Stevenson, têtu comme un Écossais. Je dois vous dire que les propos que vous avez tenus nous réconcilient avec un Irak que nous avions un peu perdu de vue. Ce sont ceux d'un homme qui manifeste encore une fois, qui est l'incarnation du courage politique. Et je voudrais que les propos que vous avez tenus, le constat sans complaisance mais sans arrogance, le constat honnête que vous avez fait de la situation en Irak soit largement diffusé, que grâce à vous, Monsieur le Président, on puisse connaître, effectivement, reconnaître, en quelque sorte, cet Irak que nous aimons. Parce que vous êtes un homme politique qui a choisi l'action, qu'il a choisi dans des conditions extrêmement difficiles, les plus difficiles que nous puissions imaginer, et nous sommes confortablement assis à nos places, alors que vous avez vécu le pire. Et je dois dire que ce que vous nous avez montré doit nous être profitable et doit être pour nous un enseignement à deux égards. Le premier égard, c'est qu'il ne faut jamais oublier que le gouvernement des hommes doit s'appuyer sur des équilibres. D'abord, l'équilibre des pouvoirs. Vous nous avez dit la concentration des pouvoirs qui est faite en Irak et qui ressemble malheureusement beaucoup à la concentration des pouvoirs qui est faite en Iran, avec le système du velayat et faqih, c'est-à-dire un système d'une théocratie absolue sans équivalent dans l'histoire et dans le monde. Et cet équilibre, cette concentration des pouvoirs et la négation même, non pas seulement de la démocratie, mais du gouvernement des hommes. Et puis il y a aussi l'équilibre entre les nations. L'Irak est un grand pays, je l'ai dit, je le répète, vous le savez mieux que moi, et il ne doit pas y avoir dans cette partie du Moyen-Orient, qui est une partie qui est faite d'équilibres subtils, ancestraux entre des diverses nations, il ne doit pas y avoir cette rupture brutale de tous ces équilibres avec un pays, l'Iran, que nous aimons aussi, que nous respectons, et à travers la présence de tous nos amis, les moudjahidines du peuple, eh bien, l'Iran n'a pas non plus de vocation à dominer cette région du monde. Et il faut retrouver des équilibres entre tous ces pays qui sont des pays essentiels à la paix du monde. Alors, ces équilibres des pouvoirs, cet équilibre des pouvoirs entre les citoyens, entre les nations, nous devons le retrouver. Mais vous nous avez aussi donné une autre leçon, c'est celle de la tolérance. Vous avez, à travers Al-Iraqiya, vous avez voulu et vous voulez réconcilier les communautés entre elles. L'Irak n'a pas vocation à éclater entre plusieurs pays, entre plusieurs entités. L'Irak a vocation à être un pays où toutes les communautés se retrouvent. Il y a la communauté chiite, il y a la communauté sunnite, il y a, permettez-moi de vous le dire aussi, la communauté chrétienne. Il y a des communautés religieuses, il y a des communautés ethniques. Il faut que toutes ces communautés se retrouvent au sein d'un ensemble et qui retrouve lui aussi les voies du progrès et les voies de la paix. Vous avez choisi en particulier de lever très haut le drapeau du droit, le drapeau de la justice, contre le sort qui est fait en Irak à l'organisation des Moudjahidines du peuple et au Conseil national de la résistance iranien. Pourquoi? Parce que vous êtes un homme de tolérance, parce que vous savez que jamais les Moudjahidines du peuple n'ont menacé la paix publique ni les institutions du gouvernement de l'Irak. Alors, le combat que vous avez mené, les protestations que vous avez émises, la défense que vous avez faite de l'OMPI et du Conseil national de la résistance iranienne, vous sont, nous devons vous en être redevables, car vous le faites dans des conditions qui ne sont pas du tout les nôtres, qui sont infiniment plus courageuses. Alors le courage politique que nous pouvons manifester dans nos discours n'est rien à côté de celui que vous manifestez dans vos actes. Et de ceci, Monsieur le Président, nous devons vous en être reconnaissants. Comme l'a dit le président Stuart Stevenson, vous nous avez donné, en tout cas, vous m'avez rendu l'espoir. Le hope, c'est bien comme ça qu'on dit. Et je pense que cet espoir que vous venez ici nous redonner à Bruxelles, nous devons vous en remercier. Alors, du fond du cœur, Monsieur le Président, merci.
Thank you, Mr. President. In fact, really, I was only doing the job I was paid for. And it just happened that during my presence in Baghdad, President Tariq Al-Hashmi was there too, but I never had a chance to meet him face to face. First, because I was not allowed to. And second, because we were locked up in the green zone, and to move anywhere, it takes a great deal of security arrangements. But it's a great opportunity for me, Mr. President Tariq Al-Hashmi, that I met you today in the free democratic environment of Europe. Just to tell you how much I admire your action when you were the only authority in Baghdad visiting prisons. Prisons were one of the issues I was following very closely, and I know a lot about that file. I followed the file when you were visiting those prisons, which I didn't have access to, but probably I also had access to some prisons you didn't have access to. I visited quite often Rosafa, and I visited quite often this notorious Al-Sharaf prison, secret prison, or call it whatever, but it's a prison run directly by the office of the Prime Minister. I visited it first when the leaders of the Yazidis was abducted. He was taken all over the country, from Dahouk to Mosul down to Baghdad, everywhere. And it was my job to follow up on his situation. And I discovered him in Al-Sharaf. So it was some of my efforts contributed to bring in his case to the attention of the international community. But I know, Mr. President, you have said a lot which I entirely confirm. But not only that, I think because of the time frame you haven't mentioned everything. Because I'm aware of much more than that. And I just would give you or remind you the case of sometimes in the 2010 you hear about this number of bodies thrown in Al-Mosul streets, found with signs of torture on their bodies. And they just throw them in the streets early in the morning and blame the terrorism while they were killed in prison. Those were bodies of people where the Iraqi army was training on shooting on live prisoners. They used them as targets to train. They start shooting down to the feet and go up. That is the practice that is documented by UNAMI. And it's also documented by the United States Army. In the course of my movements in Iraq, I often interacted with security officers who carried these guns with silencers. And I jokingly tell them, what do you need this for? You are an officer, you are entitled to have a weapon for self-defense, but what do you need the silencer for? They give me some ironic kind of answer, and they tell me, oh, sometimes it's useful. That's the answer usually I get from them. But just to tell you that the establishments in Iraq are completely dysfunctional. The only probably institution that is functional is the Prime Minister's office. Because the real government is not, there is no such a thing on the ground called the government of Iraq. There is the Prime Minister's office, as President Elhashemi said, that monopolize all powers, from security to diplomacy to economy to so on and so forth. So it's that office that runs the country. And you would be amazed to know the kind of people recruited in that office. And obviously recruited on a sectarian ground. Nothing to do with competence, nothing to do with experience. We participated in doing some training to the police. And the children of the Magna Carta, British officers, go to Baghdad to train the police on the fundamental principles of dealing with detainees and the habeas corpus, how to handle a prisoner. The EU spends a lot of money on this. But in the end, the lessons they learn, they use them to sort of defeat the system of human rights, not to implement and improve the situation. They learn the rules, international standards, in order to defeat them, not to implement them. And that is financed by the EU money. the system, judicial system, is based on confession. A judicial system based on confession necessarily means the use of torture. UNAMI doesn't use the word torture, they use duress. And there is a big difference between duress and torture. Torture is a crime against humanity. Duress is just a civil law kind of pressure on it. So UNAMI uses duress, but in fact it's torture. Torture is crime against humanity. This is what the current Iraqi judicial system is based on. The other thing is the prosecutor basing himself on hearsay evidence. And I tell you that I followed a number of cases personally. I met with judges and asked them directly the question to show me in certain cases evidence, material evidence, forensic evidence. I was often given hearsay, not of a first-hand or second-hand, third and fourth-hand stories gathered in a file. And Mr. President, you might remember Judge Aboudi, who is handling the case of the so-called Mujahideen terrorists. I asked him in his office to show me any evidence that he has against these people. He put on the table a large number of cases, and his secretary was reading to me the evidence. Not a single case had an evidence that a court could rely on to convict the person. They were all hearsay of third and fourth hand. So that is the situation of the judicial system. The security. It's very painful to say that there are 5 institutions in Iraq that have the authority to arrest people and intern them. Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Social Affairs with juveniles, Social and Labor Affairs, the Prime Minister's Office, and in the north also they have their own system, Peshmerga and the Assayas. All these people, all these institutions have a right to arrest people. And they intern them or they keep them in prisons without any due process. And they keep them indefinitely. I gathered a large number of lists of people arrested without charges for up to 5 years. For no reason, but suspected of terrorism. They are arrested without any trial, without any charges, and then when they were freed, they were left at the door of the prison, at the gate. By one institution, another institution of the 5 will come and arrest them again. So one institution will hand you over to the street, the other institution will come and arrest you. And this is how people could end up permanently in prison, changing hands depending on which institution they fall in. Now, the situation of the people in Ashraf. You know, after the 1st of September, Prime Minister Maliki said, we don't know who did it. This is shocking to me, absolutely shocking for such a high authority, the highest authority in the land, would make such a blatant lie. Because You and I, we know, and I know very closely, that nobody could ever enter that area of Ashraf without being detected. That is the area where you have 2 battalions of the Rapid Intervention Forces, battalions of the Mechanized Infantry, battalion of police, posted all around the camp. If the Prime Minister say, we don't know, that means all these battalions were sleeping there. It's just a dormitory. They're not aware of what's going around them. But is it easy to move into this camp, chase people around, kill 52, abduct 7, put them in vans, take them out of the camp, and all these battalions of the security, the highly trained security around, nobody knows, nobody detected them. It is really an insult to our intelligence to hear such a thing. But about the 7, where are they? Again, you remember the 36 in 2009 when they left Al-Khalis. It didn't take me more than 24 hours to find them. They were my neighbors in the green zone, next to the house of the deputy president. Not you, Mr. President, the other one. Few meters from his house. They were hidden there. So I visited them. And in the presence of the security forces, I told them, oh no, you are my neighbors. I will come again and visit you. Next day I went, I disappeared again. And after a few days, I found out they were in Al-Muthanna, in the airport. So this is the situation. It's not with the Ashrafis, it's with the people of Iraq. The people of Iraq are suffering. I don't have time to go through all the flagrant violations of human rights the Iraqi people are suffering from. But I think His Excellency the President, Al-Hashmi, has highlighted those cases, and I could only confirm and say that the file is much bigger, at a much higher scale than what we could mention in this short time. So I thank you very much for your attention and for listening to me.
I came to appreciate you with enormous pride, because I remember we were getting ready to release about 500 detainees. And we shared the concern of the detainees going out the gates, going to the bus depot, and being arrested by the death squads. And you said to me you are willing to stay at the compound until we figure out a solution. Unfortunately, we were not able to do it that day. But I did work with members of your staff, and I remember the real giant man, and I forget his name, trying to figure out a way to solve the problem with the death squads. And you were the one person that was determined to bring an end to the death squads, bring an end to the torture. When I heard the charges that were brought up against you, I wrote an article, and I recently updated it, and I will share it with you. Anybody can use it anywhere they want, because I knew those charges were bogus, I knew they were wrong, and they were designed to silence a very good man trying to do a very humane mission. And I thank you. As you have mentioned, in Iraq today, and it's been mentioned many times and by my friend Taha, The random arrests are everywhere. People cannot drive 300 yards, but they run into a new checkpoint. That is why when our State Department stated on the rocket attacks on Camp Liberty that there is no evidence the Iraqi government was involved, I knew it was nonsense, because no way could rockets be launched onto Camp Liberty with such precision that the Iraqi government could not have been involved. They could not have been brought into position. And when the Iraqi Hezbollah claimed, well, we fired those rockets, we fired 18. Problem, over 40 rockets either went into the camp or around the camp. Al-Batit, the head of Iraqi Hezbollah, had not been properly briefed as to how much he was supposed to have confessed to. Those rockets were fired by either the Iraqi government or the Iranian Quds Force. Either way, they were working together. And it's true, al-Maliki, as the head of government, as the head of the Ministry of Defense, as the head of Ministry of Interior, National Security, and he has his own 700-man security detail and 12,000-member, what we call the Dirty Brigade, the Dirty Division, going around enforcing brutality. He is not even the legitimately elected Prime Minister. Alawi won the election. But Maliki violated the Constitution and saw to it that Alawi was not able to build a government. And I keep thinking, if Alawi was able to build a government with former Deputy Prime Minister Al-Jabari once again on staff, and you on his staff, Iraq would be a very good country today, the country that 4,483 Americans died trying to build. I am appalled at the way the Western governments, the executive branches everywhere, look the other way. And I am extremely ashamed of my own government. And as Mr. Tanter can say, they know very well my feelings, and I have expressed it directly to them, as well as in briefings about them. Then we look at Ashraf. Open desert. I was the commander. First, in Iraq, I was the anti-terrorism officer for the whole country, later the operations officer for detention operations, then later the commander of Camp Ashraf. There is no way anything could get within miles of Camp Ashraf without people at Ashraf knowing it. The camp was completely surrounded. Nobody could have got in. The way they did come in was from the north. That is the area where the Americans, we built up that base and turned it over to the Iraqi divisions. And all those Iraqis were put there by Maliki. All that military was put there when Maliki was having problems with Barzani, and they were trying, and he was either to keep the Peshmerga from coming south, or so Maliki could launch his offensive to the north. The uniforms of the people who came in were Iraqi SWAT. The tactics they were using, I looked at the tapes with John Sano, former CIA Director of Covert Operations, and we examined them. Those were American tactics. We trained Iraqi military, and they used those exact tactics. It's like a fingerprint. They knew exactly where they were to go. The assault forces knew exactly where they needed to go. They also knew exactly who they needed to kill. Commander Zora received 3 bullets to the head. My friend Hussein received 2 bullets to the head, one by a rifle, one by a pistol from the side. He was already dead. But this is the coup de grace, because these assault forces were going to deliver the extra shots. As mentioned, the people were handcuffed, shot in the head. In the hospital where they were receiving assistance, and I've been in that building, I've been in that hospital. The assault forces came in, killed the wounded, and killed the nurse attending to the wounded. Then they left. Everybody inside Iran who wants democracy and freedom and justice, are a victim of that attack. Humanity is a victim. Let me submit this. Anybody who claims, as we've had people within my own State Department and other governments say, no evidence exists the Iraqi government was involved in the attack on Ashraf, they are either stupid or they are a liar. Thank you.
Well, Lord McGuinness, Director Bonet, Vice President Stephenson, Prime Minister Ghazali, and it's a pleasure to be here with Dr. Hashemi. And what I'd like to do, like Dr. Hashemi did, is to have three ideas. Everything is in three for me. First of all, you are known by the company you keep. And Dr. Hashemi, you could have folded, you could have been with Maliki, you could have stood with the bad guys, but you didn't. You didn't. And the second point is that you can exile a person, but you cannot exile an idea. You stood for something. You stood for principle. They cannot take that away from him. And then third, I want to come back to this idea of the company by asking a simple question. On whose shoulders does this man stand? You stand on a whole phalanx of people, and I will name them. Okay, let's go to the first one. So you know that if you sleep with dogs, you'll wake up with the fleas. With fleas, and you didn't do that. You ate with the angels in Hotel Tehran, and you came back with the nutrition of freedom. That's what you did at Ashraf. And the second point about exiling a man like Dr. Hashemi. You really didn't exile yourself. They exiled you. But the idea of freedom that you held so dearly is still present. The demonstrations are going on. People are risking their lives. And that's the kind of thing that you have done. You remind me in this respect of Montazeri. Ayatollah Montazeri told Ayatollah Khomeini that you can't kill 30,000 people and exile the Mujahideen. The Mujahideen will survive the 30,000 dead. They will survive. And that's what they have done. Now, I'm going to hit this third point again and talk about the vision that you manifest with respect to the kind of people on whose shoulders you rest. You walk in one of the greatest American presidents, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR. Why do I say that? Because you talked about freedoms, the different kinds of freedoms. And Roosevelt had this idea of the four freedoms in order to undergird the American participation in the Second World War. So he said freedom from want, freedom from fear, freedom to speak, and freedom to worship. I would like to focus on the two that you mentioned, and that is to say freedom from fear and freedom to speak. And that then reminds me of Martin Luther King, who said, we are not afraid. You know, we shall overcome. We are not afraid. Mutavan vabayad vahame bavayad. Yes? But I must say, Professor Tanter speaks to some Farsi, but Dr. King didn't, did he? Now, you spoke, Dr. Hashemi, about the principle of human rights, the protection of minorities. And this mirrors another great leader on whose shoulders you stand, and that is Madame Rajavi and her 10-point plan. Here, here. So you're known by the company you keep. You keep some pretty good company. Look at this. Look at the people here. You're known by that. You have identified yourself in exile, but not in exile. You're standing up. You're risking your life, but you are risking your life. But you stand for principle. And you stand for principle, and therefore you stand on the shoulders of all of the other great leaders of the world, and you and Alawi will be the leaders of Iraq, of a free Iraq of the future. Let's say it for you.
Dear Vice President, I do remember the time when you suffered the losses of your brothers and sisters. I do remember the messages I conveyed to you and the answer you conveyed to me in writing at the time. And I always admired, without any limitations, your capacity, your endurance, your never giving up. I have never seen this before in my life. Someone that could have gone through what you have been going, that has been resisting all of those who were telling at this time, and I know, and some of your relatives, close relatives, and some of your cousins that were refugees in Europe saying, listen, abandon, there is nothing to do, we cannot do it, it's not possible, but you insisted. You are the bravest politician I can remember to have met and worked with. And looking at you, I think that especially we Europeans, we Westerners, we have to think of these 10 years and to think, how could it be possible? I just read in a newspaper, I don't know if you did, that the evaluation that has been made of the victims of everything that has been happening in the last 10 years is already over the 500,000 in Iraq. Not the 114,000 of the official counts, but over 500,000. What I do not know of any country where such a mass violation of human rights, such corruption has been doing, and still this was after a Western intervention. I cannot know of biggest disaster. And now we are seeing our leaders to deny the evidence, to go with the culprits of the attacks, to negotiate with Mr. Rouhani, thinking that Mr. Rouhani will change what he has been doing for over 30 years. And trying to get out of the way everything that can hide their plans. And pretending that they do not know who has been murdering systematically in Iraq. Our friends at the Mujahideen in Ashraf is a case in point, so well documented. The photos of the guys exist. There is no shadow of doubt of what happened. And still they think that they will save something by appeasing them. I can only remember one book that really impressed me enormously, Jan Kershaw, Lord Londonderry, Making Friends with Hitler. One of the passages of the book is really remarkable. It's after the nomination of Adolf Hitler to Chancellor of Germany. And there, the Times of London, and the Times of London was the most reputed newspaper of the time, and it transmitted the atmosphere, said, well, we have to do everything to support, because he's the moderate. Adolf Hitler is the moderate. There are radicals, Goebbels and Goering, but he is the moderate. And we will save the peace in our continent and in our world. And we know what was the outcome of this. And I am very, very much afraid we are really repeating it. And these leaders of ours do not understand what they are doing. They are repeating the same grave errors. They are abandoning the Democrats, as they did, for instance, the Czechs. In 6 months, the Czechs became terrorists, became whatever, because of Hitler. And this is the biggest tragedy that we might ever cooperate with. And I am very, very happy to see, Mr. Vice President, you are here, and to see Struan, and to see all of you to say no. We have to say no to appeasement. We have to stick for the principles. We have to stick for people like you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to close this evening's meeting by thanking again Dr. Al-Hashemi for risking his life and security to come here. I want to thank all of the speakers who have made remarkable contributions this evening and who continue to give up their time, their energy, their family life to back the cause of good against evil. So thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
Très bien.